again, and welcome back. We are here with your favorite veterinary podcasters. My name is Stacey Gonzalez. I am a communications and digital marketing specialist in veterinary medicine. So this is Megan Sprinkle, and you are the host of Vet Life Reimagined podcast. We have Dr. Susan Little and Dr. Jolle Kirpensteijn as well. They're back, her podcast hosts, and Jolle just did an episode of the Veterinary Surgery Podcast.
Right.
Yes. And Dr. Annie Chavent, and you are with My Veterinary Life Podcast, which is the AVMA Podcast.
Correct.
Awesome. So we are going to talk about challenges in podcasting and solutions. So we're talking about the tough stuff, the hard-hitting questions. So my first question is for you, Megan. What common mistake do new podcasters make?
Oh, goodness. That's a really good question. I'm not quite sure. What would be a common mistake a new podcaster might make? I think worrying too much about bullet point types of questions. I have seen that one a lot. I think it is very good to do some research on the topic or your guest or however the flow is. But if you stick too much to these bullet point questions and aren't listening to your guest, this would be like if you have a guest type of podcast, it is really obvious that it's not smooth and it's very hard to listen to. So I think that's one mistake that I have seen people make.
Okay, interesting. That's a good one.
Yeah.
Is there anything, I'll put this out to everybody on the panel, that you wish you knew about podcasting before you started?
Everything.
Could you narrow your scope?
It's when you, at least when I started, I'm not going to speak for Jolle because he's way more professional than I am, but at least when I got into this, I wasn't thinking very much about a lot of things, the quality of your equipment, who's going to do your editing, how do you get your guests, like there's just so many sort of, day-to-day, almost more mundane things, right, that all of a sudden, you have to think about. And so we have, to some degree, like as all of us do, you make it up a bit on the fly, right? Yeah. What do you think?
I was very well prepared.
He was.
Very well prepared, obviously. No, I think that we talked about it in the first session a little bit. What is the goal of your podcast? Not having a real goal really will limit the success or the way you do the podcast. And then the other thing is don't worry about failing, and don't focus too much on how many people download the podcast in the beginning, because there will not be that many.
So your mother and your brother.
Exactly, and then it's okay too.
That's okay.
As long as you have fun in it, it is a lot of work. I think that's one thing that I would say that I had not as expected how much work it truly is, especially if you do everything yourself. Then it is a tremendous amount of work. It takes a tremendous amount of dedication, especially when you want to do it at a regular interval, which we tend to say that that's the right way to do it. So if you do a weekly podcast, it is a weekly podcast. It is a lot of work. It's a lot of time, and you really have to make time for that.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about you?
I would like to kind of build upon a few of those themes. I really like the idea of making sure that you have a goal in mind. I listened to another podcast that actually went one step further, and they created a podcast manifesto. So it's goals, and then kind of this podcast is, and this podcast is not. And so defining the goals, but additionally that helped give them a framework of which guests do we want to invite on the show, which guests maybe are not in alignment. So kind of starting with the goal and then fleshing that out even further can be really, really helpful, especially for the new podcasters, to your original question. And then the work, of course, that's what I was going to add to your comment, Megan. Be prepared for it to take 3 to 5 times the recording time on the back end in terms of scheduling, editing, marketing, that kind of thing. I certainly was not prepared for that multiple, and if you know it, then you can plan for it, but you got to know it first.
do you have a team that you work with, or do you do it all on your own?
You are looking at her.
The team is right here.
I have recently started outsourcing one level of my editing. So I actually use a third-party online service to edit my podcast for sound quality and to add intro, outro, but I still edit for length and content. So.
Wow. What about you, Megan? Do you have a team, or are you the team?
I'm the team. Yeah, for over 4 years, I have done absolutely everything myself. So
Wow.
yeah.
Yeah, wow.
I have great respect for that because
Seriously.
I don't think we could have done it without our team. So we have Stacey obviously for
Stacey's
our
part of our
marketing,
team.
and then we have Ben, Susan's son, who does an amazing job with the audio
He does our
visuals.
editing and
yeah.
puts the
So,
intros and outros. Like he does all of that, which is tedious.
Right.
We did that ourselves for about 4 years and just recently
It's
switched. It
tedious.
makes a difference. It saves some time.
Yola, you did it originally
I did
for us.
I did
yeah.
it too. So
Yeah.
until I couldn't anymore because it took too much time.
Yeah.
And you also get sometimes I think you kind of overdo it because I think what is nice about our podcast is that it's free flow. We don't edit anything out. If people say bad words, we leave it in. So very rarely we change things, except when there is a equipment failure.
Or a
And
glitch.
So then we tell Ben, hey, please take this out. But for the rest, we leave it open, which gives it a little bit of an authenticity that people really like. So we didn't do it originally. This is a confession. We didn't do it originally for the authenticity. We just did it because it was easy, right? But it worked really well. So yeah, you just have to once again don't be perfect. Progress over perfection, as they say. in
Susan has a good
podcasting.
saying for this.
Don't let perfect be the enemy of good.
Right, that's
Yes.
exactly it. So you need to know your limits, and maybe it's every 2 weeks you want to do it in the beginning instead of every week. Or there's even people that do a daily podcast. I don't know how they do it.
So I'll throw
Yeah.
this question out, Megan, to you and Annie, to you, since you are their team. For a new podcaster, how many hours would you say, if you could convert it into hours worked a week, should they expect to invest in a podcast episode from start to finish?
Many for me, but that also doesn't mean that you have to invest that much if you're wanting to start a podcast. I do agree that consistency is a very big factor in making a podcast successful. One, you may not care how successful your podcast is. It may just be something that you want to do. Honestly, the thing that's so rewarding for me, and Annie and I were talking about this, are the relationships that I've developed over doing this podcast. And that's a perfectly good reason for wanting to do a podcast. Going back to having a goal and a focus for your podcast is also personally, why are you doing this? And understanding that, and then you can prioritize how you go about the podcast from the very beginning. And it doesn't mean that you can't change it later on. You can start with a monthly podcast, and if you like it and it's going well and you feel like you can handle everything, then maybe make it bi-monthly. So, just because I do it one way doesn't mean that you have to in order to get into podcasting to see if you like it. If it does help, I spend way too many hours on it, probably. I do have an issue with the perfectionist thing. Part of it is a creative outlet for me, so I enjoy it, right? But you may not enjoy the editing, and so those are all things that I think it's helpful to at least do it at the beginning.
Yeah.
It's helpful to kind of understand what
Right.
goes into the podcast, and then outsource it later if you need to, or you can. But just to kind of put that out there, like if being a podcaster is really important to you, understand why it's important to you. What are you able to do, and start there. And again, it's your podcast. You can do whatever you want to do on cadence, or the amount of time you put into editing, whether you leave it raw and authentic, or you're OCD like me and you have to spend quite a while editing it. So it's a podcast can be whatever you want it to be. It's your podcast, and I think that's part of the beauty of it too, is it's your ability to be creative and go whatever direction you want to go in.
listeners of the My Veterinary Life podcast will know that I am a detail and numbers person, so I'm going to answer your question specifically.
Perspectives.
The data shows. Yeah.
So I found that I spend about 3 hours per half hour of recording. So, and to Megan's point, it varies widely on your podcast, on your goals, on the level of editing. But I would say from start to finish, have scheduling, editing, because I do the marketing clips as well and promoting on social media, around 3 hours. If that's helpful for anybody, that number may be too high, too low, but some kind of benchmark. And then the other thing, if we're talking about numbers, is to be prepared for the numbers before the first episode even comes out. So doing that research on finding what hosting platform you want to use, what editing software, and so making sure that you account for that time to do the research to give yourself the solid foundation so that you can be more efficient later.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Very good point that, especially at the beginning, you may spend more time in the figuring it all out, and then once you've been doing it for a while, things become more natural and it gets a little bit faster as well. So I think that's a good thing to remember if you are just getting started.
And you do get better at it. So,
Yes.
it takes... I remember my first spay took 2 hours. At the end, it was less than 2 minutes. That is also with podcasting. So you do get better. You understand the programs that you use better. And so at the end, I started 4 hours. It took 4 hours per podcast. Now it probably takes me, I would say, 30 minutes to do. And so just because I use Audition, Adobe Audition, very comfortable with the program. It's very easy to take out things, etc., to cut and paste. So you get a certain routine that helps you doing it a little bit better. But having help from the outside helps too.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, it definitely, I think, has helped us almost just like level up a bit, right? Because it takes some of those, I don't know if mundane's the right word, but unavoidable tasks.
Yeah,
shall
like
we
managing
say?
you.
Like managing me. Yeah, Jolle deserves danger pay for that.
Right.
I think energy draining task.
Yeah,
It's like you have
what?
a set
That's
amount
a
of
good way
resources.
to put it.
Yeah.
Right. So you do have to have your own internal passion and drive to sustain you through. We've been doing it 8 years, and a lot of podcasts don't last 4 years or 5 years, right? So at this table, all of us have been doing it probably longer than average. And I think you can be very unprepared for the amount of energy drain that can be. So reaching a point where you can outsource some of the more energy-sucking tasks, right? And get to the point where you can think a little bit more creatively or strategically, right?
So given
Try to recognize when you get there and then take advantage of it. Yeah.
So given that you do a veterinary podcast and you're speaking to people about medicine, science, research, and we're here to talk about challenges, have any of you ever experienced somebody coming onto your podcast and you ended up accidentally sharing incorrect information? And if so, how did you deal with that?
We did have. It was I can't remember who. Honestly, I don't remember who, but I remember the guest afterwards, and maybe even immediately afterwards, saying, "I think I misstated something."
Right.
Correct.
I don't know who it was,
I don't remember
but
the
it's
circumstances, but it was
true.
almost immediately said,
They knew.
"I think I misstated something."
The nice thing here is that podcast is not live. This is live. So if I would say
Right.
something bad here,
Right.
it goes everywhere. But most of the podcasts you can edit, and that's why it is really good to edit. And so you can take these parts out in a way that it is still a natural flow. That's why post-editing takes 3 hours, because you want to be sure that everything sounds good, that people don't say the wrong things. We have never had a person that did it on purpose and said something that is completely ridiculous. That's not the purpose of our podcast either. So it's not likely that a person comes be invited. So if you have a podcast that's, for instance, political or goes really into the the horny subjects, yes, then that might happen. I think with veterinary medicine, we're a pretty safe space.
But anybody can mistake. Like you can, we all have those little sort of brain farts where, you're thinking of one thing and you get it mixed up with something else, right? So I think it is, especially if your podcast involves having guests on, right? That
the one thing that we did do at a certain point after, I don't know, our first year of podcasting is adding a sentence that these are our own opinions.
we have a disclaimer. That's a good point.
Have a disclaimer in the podcast, so I think that's a good idea.
That's important, and especially if it's like veterinary medicine, right? I think our disclaimer even says something about we're not giving veterinary advice, So
Right.
I think having an appropriate disclaimer is smart.
Okay. Megan, what do you do when you run out of episode ideas?
Oh, yeah.
I think I set myself up for success with my focus. So my podcast, Vet Life Reimagined, is all about the different career stories. And so every single person in veterinary medicine has a unique career story. So I will never run out of ideas unless I get through every person in veterinary medicine, and I'm pretty sure I won't. So I think I do frequently say I set myself up for success on that. But I do understand how that could be a fear. And the surprising thing is if you look up anything, any topic into a podcast, whatever your favorite podcast platform is, there's a podcast on everything.
Yes.
And so you might think, like, how in the world does that person have a podcast still going? Like, do they not run out of topics? And you will be surprised that if you really do something that you are passionate about, you are probably gonna not have that problem. So
Right.
I think for us, it's not running out of topics per se. I think we both get these little sort of on the fly, that would this. For us, it's a person usually, right? Or something is topical and we think of the person, and I try to capture them kind of on the fly. But for us, it's probably more how do we schedule? How do we schedule people? That's I think as much a challenge as ideas.
Yeah, our podcast format is similar to Megan's in highlighting career stories. I've found sometimes that if I'll get kind of on idea threads or themes, and we do like to do 4 episode long series on a theme, or 3 mini series and things like that. So that's a fun way to kind of help narrow that search for a group of guests. And then I love tapping into my network. So it's I recognize there's some inherent bias in me thinking up each of the guests. I'm only pulling from my network. So then maybe I will grab a colleague and say, hey, who do you know that you think would be a good guest? And then maybe they have some guest recommendations. So trying to acknowledge the power of your network, but also the limitations, and tap into others as well.
That's good
Okay.
advice.
That helps you stay consistent too then in producing episodes.
Yes.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Do you have
and
any other
planning ahead.
strategies for that? Because that seems to really make or break podcasts, is people being consistent, sticking with their episode schedule. Any strategies or even tools or apps that help you save time?
Spreadsheets.
Spreadsheets.
Yeah. Spreadsheets, project management, either software or apps and things like that. So we have a master spreadsheet with the dates and guests. And I recently started using a CanJam board.
Yeah.
So because each podcast has so many
It's a project
steps.
in a way, isn't
so
it?
yeah, it's helpful
Each
to
one.
kind of move your episodes along with, are we scheduled? Have I drafted my outline? Did we do the interview? Have we edited? Have we made the social media clips? Because if you're doing a few at a time, trying to stay ahead of things, they can get mixed up pretty quickly.
And it doesn't, it doesn't have to be really complicated, right? It can be really simple to do that.
Yeah.
I think another thing that helps, and I think maybe it was you that said, maybe just start at once a month, right? So don't overcommit yourself at the start. I think that's a big thing in trying to stay consistent. Because it is more work than you think, and it's better to start out less frequently and then ramp yourself up, right? Than it is to find out you've burnt yourself out and you can't sustain it because you've set yourself an unrealistic schedule.
Yeah, I'll actually jump in on that. So the podcast founder, Dr. Marcy Kirk, managed that in a really creative way that I think it would be helpful to share. So My Vet Life has always been a weekly podcast, but in the beginning, she did bonus episodes if she had additional content. So that didn't get her kind of trapped into a more regular schedule than she was able to commit to. But then if there were those episodes, it was ad lib bonus episode this week. And so that's a way to add content without kind of leveling up your baseline.
Yeah. Strategies like that are really, really helpful, aren't they?
Yeah.
So I have a question for the panel. Sorry to interrupt.
Wait a second.
Yeah,
Hold on now.
I tend to do that. But
I knew he'd break through sooner or
because,
later.
Lately, it seems that listening to podcasts is not enough. You have to have a video. So how are you dealing
That's in
with
here.
it? Oh, it is. Good.
Yeah.
So because I'm sometimes struggling with that a little bit, but because it's so different. But how do you two deal with it?
Yeah, I don't. So I'll pass it to Megan if you have thoughts, and then I can come back to my don't.
So from the very beginning, I recorded both and started putting the video on YouTube. So I kind of went ahead and jumped on that bandwagon fairly early. I don't necessarily say anyone has to do that because it is actually a lot more work to do the video. And that's kind of where I stop with my perfectionist sometimes, is that you can really start getting into the weeds, putting B-roll on top of video and all of the things. And if you watch some of these people that do podcasts, either full-time or they have teams behind them, you can be very intimidated to do video. So I don't want anyone to feel like they have to, but it is becoming more and more common. Now a lot of the platforms integrate it straight onto the audio platform. So I can see why there's more pressure to do the video as well. But I host mine on Buzzsprout, and they are a great platform for independent podcasters. And they have forever encouraged people to not feel pressured to do that. So again, it kind of goes back to, what do you feel really called to? What do you enjoy? And again, you can always change that later. You can always either add video later. It's a lot easier to add it later than to take it away, I do feel.
We recorded video almost from the start, even though we really didn't do very much with it. So maybe that's one piece of advice, like don't record audio only, because it's not that much work to record audio and video, and just save the video files, right?
Yep.
And you might find a time then, and it may even give you some video files that you can play around with and just see, right?
I do feel that the people that we do a lot of interviews, they're more comfortable audio only. So that's
a lot of people are.
So you do have that you.
But they forget about it too, right? After the first bit, they forget that they're on video. So. But you will. There is a difference, I think. If they think they're going to be on YouTube, right? There's a difference.
I'd say I reevaluate the decision probably quarterly, so it's definitely consistently on my radar. The barrier currently is the video editing. That's, as Megan said, it's a step above audio editing. So if I can find a way, we are not opposed. Think about it, check in regularly about it, but currently no. Yeah.
Even if you don't do too much fancy video editing, I know, because I'm one of those people, I'll find a podcast on YouTube, but I don't watch it, I listen to it.
Yeah.
Right? So a lot of people do that.
Sometimes it's that YouTube is the preferred platform that they're using.
Exactly.
And they're just listening to the audio.
Right.
Although the funny thing is that I put my audios on YouTube and I got a lot of comments about the fact that there's no video.
Well, there's video now.
Right.
So I actually have a question directed to the two of you. What are the pros and cons of having a co-host on your podcast versus being a single podcaster?
Oh my God. Waldorf and Stadler
Lord.
here. Right.
Because that's a big decision. Launch a podcast on my own versus launch it with a friend or colleague.
He's so hard to manage.
I can give a quick answer here. So Susan is the person that knows everything. I'm the person that doesn't know anything. So that's a really nice combination. I think I'm the one that asks the more difficult questions sometimes because I don't know as much as she does. It is amazing to have a person with you that you can rely on, that at least she knows the knowledge that you need to have a good podcast. So for me, that really helps. So she gives me lots of comfort.
Unless it's a surgery topic, and then you can see his eyes light up, and
surgery,
he's like, at last.
Surgery and dermatology.
Yeah.
We don't have to go there with it.
We don't have to go there. I think it does help to be complementary. I think we're complementary. So that's number one, you know, that your strengths are complementary. You can each bring something to the table, because, you know, Jolle has always felt very comfortable with things like social media and reaching out, like communications in general. He's felt very comfortable. And then I think the other thing is to learn how to be relaxed and familiar with your co-host, right? At least for us, I think that's a little bit of the part of our success is we have these recurrent themes of
failure.
Yeah, usually mine, that run through, that become a bit of a theme or a running gag. But you know, you have to be comfortable with your co-host, I think. Yeah.
Well, we are out of time, and I have no idea if we're still recording, but if we are,
Yes.
Thank you for joining us, and thank you all so much. This has been wonderful.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for hosting.
Yes, you did a great job.